I would advise Iran not to start their nuclear program. I would advise them very strongly. If they do, there will be very severe consequence. Okay?
Strong words from the president. Here now to react is Utah Congressman Chris Stewart, a member of the House Intel Committee. Congressman, thanks for being here. So what should the U.S. do if Iran now ramps up its nuclear and missile technology?
Well, I think that they need to do what they promised to do, and that is to increase the sanctions, to bring allies in, to reimpose the sanctions, and to use our economic and diplomatic levers to convince them not to do this. I got to tell you, I think the president was very thoughtful on this. We went from 3-month increments where he said we're looking at it, we're looking at it. He made a thoughtful decision, but it was the only thing he could do. I think anyone who's fair about this looks at this agreement and realizes that it was devastatingly, the foundation of this thing was just unyielding and impossible to implement, and it was really the only choice he had was to take a look at this and see if we could do better.
But the question is, if the sanctions are not enough, if they defy the sanctions that we put on and continue to build their nuclear arsenal. Some people are saying, by the way, that Israel, which has showed enormous fortitude in terms of getting intel out of Iran, last week Benjamin Netanyahu displayed the extraordinary amount of evidence that they had managed to steal from Iran, about a ton of evidence. Why not leave it up to them? If something beyond a sanction is necessary, if some kind of military action is necessary, could we leave it up to the Israelis?
Well, perhaps, although I really don't think we're going to get there. Look, people have been saying President Obama and Secretary Kerry always created this kind of a false choice. Well, you either have to have this agreement or we're going to go to war. Well, that's not true. It wasn't true when they said it, and I don't think it's true now. There's a lot of tools that we have between those two extremes, the agreement or actually military action. And we still have those tools available to us, and the president's going to use those tools.
Well, let's talk about how, forgive me, but I want to talk about exactly how those tools will be implemented, because there are sanctions against U.S. companies if they dare to defy the sanction we put on. But there are the secondary sanctions, and John Bolton talked about them to Fox News. I want to play the soundbite and get your reaction. Go ahead.
The sanctions take effect immediately, so there's no new business allowed under the terms that are prescribed. For existing contracts, there are wind-down provisions that come into effect, and the Treasury Department and others will be laying those out in more detail. But obviously, our sanctions have enormous effect on Europe already. Licenses of American technology, if American companies can't use those licenses to sell to Iran, neither is anybody else.
Now, let's just take one company, for example, Airbus. 10% of their parts and equipment come from the United States. They sell completed planes that are partly made with U.S. hardware to Iran. That would be prohibited under the sanctions that are proposed. So what then? I mean, in what way are these sanctions going to hit our European allies?
Well, there will be some impacts, which, of course, why our European allies were so anxious for us not to reimpose sanctions, because even though technically they're not compelled to, the reality of it, the economic reality of it, is that they would fall under some of these sanctions and by proxy would be affected by them. But it's one of the things that I think we need to recognize, and that is this can't be, and in fact it isn't a surprise to our European allies that they would be put in this position. When President Obama created an agreement that was so weak and was so distrusted by not just Republicans but other people in Washington, D.C., that he knew he couldn't get it through the Senate, right, as a normal treaty would be. Everyone has known for the last few years that this thing was built on a foundation of sand, it was built on a foundation of deception, and that we would likely come to this point of time.
Well, and in point of fact, a lot of Democrats were against it as well, some of whom are now upset about the president's pulling out of it. Yeah. You know, President Obama's justification for it originally was that if we release all of this money to the Iranian government, it's going to bring them out of the dark ages. They'll use it to revitalize their economy. People will wake up, become more democratic. In fact, none of that has happened. They've used the money just internally. It hasn't spread out, bleeded out into the economy itself. They continue to do these military expansions in places like Lebanon and Syria. They practically own Lebanon by now. Lord knows what they would like to do with the UAE, or UEA. So exactly in what way have President Obama's plans to bring them out of the dark ages worked, if at all?
Well, they haven't worked, and it was built on a fantasy from the very beginning. I mean, I asked the question again and again, give me any evidence, what historical evidence do we have that we can trust Iran as a partner? Because there's zero evidence. And it's very clear, by any measure, their economy is worse now than it was 2 years ago. And that's just the truth. This hasn't helped the Iranian people at all, not by 1 penny or $1. All of this money has gone to war in Yemen, to more death and destruction in Syria, to expanding their power base through Hezbollah, through Hamas. It's gone through the Quds Force. That's what this money has been spent on, and many of us said that's what this money would be spent on. And once again, we can impose sanctions. There's diplomatic levers that we can use, but we have to do that with our eyes wide open, and that is, they're not a trusted partner.